The next part will be the discussion for the differences and similarities of theoretical and conceptual framework. So let's start with the theory. Let's start with theoretical framework. So theory is formulated to explain, predict, and understand phenomena, and in many cases to challenge and extend existing knowledge within the limits of critical bound assumption. This is according to Abel, 2008. So it is a supposition or a system of idea intended to explain something, especially one based on general principles, independent of the things to be explained. So in simple explanation, it is a carefully thought out explanation for observations of the natural world that has been constructed using the scientific method. So what is a theoretical framework itself? So theoretical framework is the structure that can hold or support a theory of a research study. So it introduces and describes the theory that explains why the research problem under study exists. So there are also purpose of theory. Now there are also purpose for the theory or purpose of the theory. And the first purpose is to summarize existing knowledge critical to the development and advancement of specific knowledge. And number two is to explain or interpret observations as well as predict and control the outcomes. And last purpose is to stimulate the effort of making discoveries. Then we move to the other half, which is the conceptual framework. But first, let's define what is concept. Concept is a generalized form of particular facts. It is based on experiences and based on real phenomena and a generalized idea of something of meaning. So it is a plan, maybe an intention, a conception, or a general idea of something. Then what is a conceptual framework? Conceptual framework represents a less formal attempt at organizing phenomena. So unlike theory, it is only based on a plan or a thought of the person. It serves as a springboard formulation for the research hypothesis and a preliminary step in constructing more formal theories. Now here's a side-by-side comparison of the conceptual and the theoretical framework. Starting with the scope, so conceptual framework has a narrower scope and the theoretical has a broader or wider scope. When it comes to the definition, conceptual framework is very specific and it defines structure with no ambiguity in the definition, while the theoretical framework is generalized and less structured, and also it is loosely defined. And then the conceptual framework is derived from concepts. So it's literally derived from concepts because of its name, conceptual. It has also specific variables that may be identified in the study itself, while in theoretical framework, it is only derived from theories that already exist. Then, a conceptual framework can provide structure, paradigm for research analysis, while theoretical framework provides the necessary foundation of the research study. And lastly, a conceptual framework lies in the entire commencement of the study, while theoretical framework is the starting point of the discussion, which makes the readers aware of what follows. The next part will be the statement of the problem. So what is a statement of the problem? Statement of a problem is an expression of the dilemma or distributing situation that needs investigation to provide understanding and direction. So the problem must be clearly stated and must be expressed in precise terms as the subject of inquiry. It indicated the population and the significant variables of the study which need to be subjected to empirical testing. In simple explanation, it is used in research work as a claim that outlines the whole problem addressed by a study. So the statement of the problem briefly addresses the question, what is the problem that the research will address? So problem statements, particularly for quantitative studies, often have the most of the following 6 components, and these are problem identification, the background, scope of the problem, consequences of the problem, knowledge gaps, and proposed solutions. Then there are three ways of stating the problem. First is a problem stated in question form, and there are two types. First is single question, and single question followed by a series of questions. So an example for a single question is, does cigarette smoking cause lung cancer among adult males? And then for a single question followed by a series of questions, this is an example. So first, ask, what are the common methods of contraception practiced by 50 selected mothers of Barangay Imelda? Then followed by a question, what side effects do these mothers experience? The next way of stating a problem is in a declarative sentence, and there are two types also. First is single declarative sentence and a series of declarative sentence. And these are examples of single declarative sentence. To identify common problem among nurses in emergency room, and to determine whether people who watch television read fewer books. Now for the examples of series of declarative sentence, the general food pattern and food intake of families whose mothers had a nutrition educational background, then followed by food groups in which their meals were deficient, and followed again by how adequate these nutritional needs are met. So the last way on stating a problem is through a declarative sentence followed by a series of questions. Now, to determine the proper sequence learning experiences in the emergency room, nurses geared to the needs of student and patient in an emergency. So this is an example of declarative sentence followed by a series of questions. There are also errors to be avoided by the researcher in stating the research problem. First is problems are elicited in broad general findings instead of the specific information needed for the solution. Next is shallow and unimportant inquiries. Next, rhetorically stated problem, which tends to elicit emotional reactions that diminish the scientific intent of the inquiry. And lastly, questions that are not testable and cannot be answered through scientific investigation.